Let me get you into the mindset, alright? There's a minefield that stretches about 10 kilometers deep and 500 kilometers across, alright? You need to disarm a path through it for the assault coming in behind you.
Nope, we're not disarming a path through it. We're just laying people down.
Exactly. Get running. You're gonna kickstart those landmines. That's how we're getting rid of it and clearing the path. It's time for Krieg. By far the funniest, silliest, most absurd, and most tragically depressing Imperial Guard regiment in the setting.
Yo, just realized the mic was on the headset mic instead of the
Your microphone quality is garbage no matter what we do. I don't know what the problem with it is. I just assume that you're cursed forever.
Outstanding. Go move to a professional studio and we will have the same shit mic quality.
Oh my god, dude. Like, we could be standing in front of the same microphone, and my audio would be fine, and you would still sound like you're calling from the moon through Xbox Live controller audio. I don't understand how you do it.
I'm just talented. That's all I got.
But like I was saying, we're talking about the Death Korps of Krieg. Extremely loyal, extremely effective, and the most blatantly... I can't say the S word without nuking our monetization, but they are the most eager people in 40k to do a flip off a building.
The fuck is the S word?
Oh, you know, commit toaster bath, unalive, bridge jumping without a bungee cord.
Oh, seppuku.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't say the S word properly. Sudoku is the closest I'm willing to get before YouTube murders us, but...
Okay. We can go with Sudoku.
We'll be covering everything from how Krieg happened, since, my god, it is a story. We'll also be covering what the Death Korps is, how they operate, how they've become so important to the Imperium. They're allowed to blatantly flaunt every rule the Imperial Guard has, and we'll be covering some of the funnier stuff about their culture as well, like how they don't really have medics that are supposed to heal people. They're more there to decide who's likely enough to go back into the battle and then execute everybody that isn't. But before we get into things, introductions, generic greetings, and welcome to Science and Sanity, a channel dedicated to bringing my love of sci-fi to you in all of its stupid, silly glory. Along for the ride and filling in as my co-host, comedic relief, and general illiterate is Steve. Introduce yourself, Steve.
Hello. I am Steve.
Perfect. You sound so thrilled to be here.
Always.
I mean, I think you should be excited, at least. Like, last video was the Guard in general, and we touched on Krieg, and when we did, you said it was your favorite part of the setting so far, so I figured, hey, let's expand on it while the iron is hot and you still remember some of the stuff we talked about, and cover the Death Korps.
Nope, I want my Flash Gordon video.
It's never happening, Steve. It's never happening, Steve.
No.
The one idea you had, the one coherent thought that passed through your brain relevant to the channel. No!
Wait a second. We have image for picture printer with this. There we go.
So let's start with the world of Krieg itself and how the Death Korps became a thing. This story starts like 2,000 years before 40k, like the year, not the setting. Ever since Krieg was incorporated into the Imperium, there were grumblings and dissent from the noble ruling class. The Imperium itself brought plenty of benefits and advantages, you know, connections to countless other worlds for trade, the security of the endless chapters of Space Marines and Imperial Guard forces and stuff, as well as the technological advances and assistance from the Mechanicus. The Imperium certainly offers a lot to its client worlds, but it also extracts an enormous price. The Imperial tithe is nothing to scoff at, assuming administrative blunders don't, like, set your tithe to $5 and a few dozen men every few centuries. The tithe is something that most planets pay and immediately have to start working on again for when they come back next time. It's relatively fair for most planets, but still very heavy taxation. And the rulers of Krieg, like all elites, do not like paying their taxes.
That's not a limited to elites thing. That's kind of a in general thing.
I kind of meant it more as in they have the capability to not pay their taxes.
Oh. Everyone has the ability to do that. It's just...
Yeah, but the elites have
know.
loopholes, they can get away with it. You know, the government's not going to come and break the elites' knees like they will lower-ranked people in the Imperium, so... This was especially bad, unfortunately, for Krieg, because they didn't just pay in manpower and weapons. Krieg was a very productive hive world and manufacturing hub for dozens of other planets in the sector. With its massive population, endless industry, and resources of dozens of other worlds flowing into it, Krieg was most likely forced to pay shitloads of money, resources, manpower, weapons, and more. The raw value of the planet was extreme. Unfortunately, the nobility got it in their brilliant, greedy little pea-sized brains that since they were so powerful and wealthy, they should just secede from the Imperium. Brilliant idea. It wasn't just for greed, though. That was a big part. It was also their rank, stupid paranoia. The ruling class was in a Kremlin kind of situation where every single one of them was a scheming rat with plans on plans on plans to kill their competitors and screw one another over, and they genuinely couldn't believe that it was pretty much just them and that the Imperium did not give a shit as long as they paid their taxes. So this essentially meant that they were inventing all kinds of enemies and all kinds of threats to their power that just didn't exist, and were going to do something monumentally stupid that they didn't have to. So when the inevitable rebellion came, and due to their mistrust, the oligarchs and dictators of the worlds abandoned the Imperium and sealed themselves inside a world that they had built into a fortress, one so fortified and defended that nothing short of a massive fleet and invasion force, probably also containing space marines, would have been able to breach it. The thing was, though, that the Imperium just didn't have the resources to send that kind of fleet, and wouldn't for potentially hundreds of years. So when the Civil War kicked off between the rebels and the loyalists, no outside forces would be interfering. And things did not look good for the loyalist men. Almost immediately, most of the hive cities on the world either turned traitor or surrendered when caught unprepared by the sudden action. The loyalists were scattered and unorganized until the patron saint of Krieg himself said, "Nah, we're doing a coup."
Okay.
Oh no, he literally did. That's canonically what happened. One of the last remaining hive cities that didn't turn traitor, he basically marched into the nobles, looked at them all, and went, "Okay, are you guys planning on turning traitor or staying loyal?" And when they took longer than, like, instantaneously to hail the God Emperor, he just killed them all and then took control. So, screw it, we're doing a coup. The last remaining hive city after this coup that remained loyalist was Ferrograd. The aristocratic dictatorial class had been executed when Colonel Jurton of the 83rd Guard Regiment took over. From that moment onward, Jurton turned Ferrograd into a fortress that the remaining loyalists rallied around and took orders from. Things, unfortunately, weren't going well. Even with this slight reprieve and this pushback, the loyalists were outnumbered dozens to one. Ferrograd was then promptly put to siege by the traitors, and this is where the first signs of Kriegs' future identity would be born. When Jurton tried again, as he had many times to call for help or reinforcements from the wider Imperium, this was the final call he would get back, and instead of it simply being one of the "hold on, not right now" or "new phone, who dis" messages that he got constantly that were not really committing to anything, this time he was put into contact with Segmentum Command directly. Jurton was then told, however, that his orders were to stop the traitors at all costs, no matter what. How do you think they planned on doing this, Steve?
By throwing everything at them.
Unfortunately, for all of the random civilians and confused innocent people on the planet, everything included WMDs. In order to assist Jurton with getting rid of the traitors, he was given the authorization and command codes to utilize the Imperium's deadliest conventional weapon. Normally, destroying planets is a really, really big no-no. There's a meme about the Imperium being really gung-ho to like nuke or virus bomb or just blow up planets willy-nilly. That's not true, because doing that kind of shit gets you executed basically immediately. Because once a planet's rendered uninhabitable, it would take the Imperium thousands of years to terraform, time and resources that the Imperium just doesn't have, especially for worlds ruined by war. So when Jurton was informed that under every hive city, including Ferrograd, was a secret arsenal of nuclear missiles, the orders were clear before they even needed to be spoken.
Legalize nuclear bombs.
You know what's really funny about that little sound clip, Steve, is that's actually a thing. Like, it's illegal to use nuclear weapons. Even though the Guard usually brings nukes wherever they go, and there's a lot of them all over the place, if you don't have, like, explicit permission to use them...
You have a permit for that?
Yeah, no, exactly. Do you have a permit for that atomic weapon, sir? If not, I'll need to see your identification, please. Jurton was given the authority and orders to reduce Krieg to an atomic wasteland. If the Emperor couldn't hold Krieg, then nobody would. This wasn't a small arsenal either. Like, this wasn't a few hundred missiles. This was thousands of city killers. A few strikes from these weapons could level a hive, and on an Imperial holiday, the Day of Ascension, or the day the Emperor became the Emperor of Mankind, Jurton entered the codes from deep under Farograd and launched most of his arsenal. Jurton didn't just lob them at enemy positions like you would expect. The first volley was fired into space, disabling and destroying virtually all of the orbital infrastructure and blinding any potential anti-missile fire from the traitors. Those orbital defenses that the tyrants had been so happy about pointing out, expecting an assault from the Imperium, were utterly unprepared for something from within. The next wave exploded in the upper atmosphere, poisoning the air and spreading radiation across the planet. The third wave bombarded traitor positions across the world with conventional tactical nuclear strikes, obliterating tens of millions of traitor forces in an instant. The last missiles, the biggest ones, were the final to hit home after everything else had been cleared away. And from their gilded towers, from their disgusting opulent mansions, the traitor lords watched helplessly as hive city after hive city was ripped apart in nuclear fire. Even to the modern day in 40k, numerous corpse cities dot the landscape of Krieg. Empty, twisting ruins still so radioactive that you just melt and die before you ever got close to their fortress walls. And by the end, this attack became known as the Great Purge, killing untold billions in the span of a few hours, and basically rendering everyone outside of Farograd's underhive and a few big bunkers that the traitors still remained in completely lifeless, just exterminated.
And they deserved it.
I mean, they turned against the God Emperor. Obviously, they deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, it's their own fault.
Not only did they refuse to pay their taxes, which warrants at least a couple broken knees, but they turned against the God Emperor himself. That's heresy of the highest order.
They're lucky that's all that happened to them.
After the Great Purge, a nuclear winter plunged most regions of the world into a piss-cold atomic winter, while many other areas that suffered direct strikes, and multiple of them, became radioactive deserts hot enough to boil you alive. The sky everywhere was permanently clouded over with ash and fallout and dust, but despite this, the war somehow didn't end, because Jurton and the Loyalists refused utterly to give up. And this is really where the beginning of that never give in, attrition means nothing, fight to the last man spirit of Krieg really starts. Because as a last act, Jurton organized the remaining Krieg regiments and prepared them for combat in these asinine conditions. They were actually planning on fighting in these conditions.
All 8 of them that were left?
Oh, well, again, the Loyalists prepared, right? There was a few million, or probably a few million traitors and stuff left, but there was also millions of Loyalists left, because they had prepared. They knew it was coming. And almost immediately after the strikes, by the way, in many cases, the mushroom clouds still hadn't dissipated. That's how fast this happened. The Loyalist Kriegers surged forward through bunkers and trenches and underhive tunnels that survived the bombardment. It took nearly 500 years of grinding, horrific war in bare-knuckle, close-quarters, fist-to-face combat to finally kill the remaining traitor forces and take control of the planet again. I would also imagine that at some point, the traitors completely forgot what they were even fighting for, and were just fighting for survival against the rabid Loyalists by that point. It was the traitors trying to survive, and the Kriegers trying to kill anyone that was a traitor, just because they were a traitor.
I mean, that's sound logic from the Loyalists there, I mean.
What other reason do you need? They disagreed with my religion, so they need to die.
POV, modern politics.
That's... Oh, God. People are gonna get angry about that in the comments, but it's fine.
It's both sides these days. What?
Yeah, but both sides are gonna get angry. Now we get to be in the middle, and everybody hates us.
All publicity is good publicity. I mean,
Yeah, to be fair. After the first few generations of fighting, though, the culture of Krieg really settled. Every generation was born to fight and die. The sins of their world were unforgivable, and to turn against the Emperor was a crime beyond any forgiveness or punishment. The only recourse was death. Death to the traitors, death to the loyalists for failing to stop them. But to end your own life, to just lay down and die out in the irradiated wasteland, was a similarly horrible sin and the act of a coward. Their lives are owed to and commanded by the God Emperor. Only at the time of his choosing, while fighting his myriad enemies, would a Kriegsman be granted the Emperor's mercy and die for the Imperium. Actually, now would be a really good time to touch on the Cult of Sacrifice, which I did not do in the original recording. If you're listening to this and you're wondering, man, why does the audio sound so different? It's because I moved to a different building in between takes, so just roll with it. So aside from just needing to be willing to face the horrible hardships of surviving on Krieg, Kriegers have something called the Cult of Sacrifice. And normally you're like, oh, whatever, fine, die for the Emperor. Yeah, bog standard across all of the Imperium. No, it goes a little farther than that. The way Krieg worships the God Emperor is through service. They pray through the killing of Big E's enemies, and they face atonement for the primordial sin of their world, i.e., the utterly mid and extremely common sin of having a rebellion, the horror, by dedicating their entire lives to Big E and receiving forgiveness in death. They are absolutely gung-ho to die if needed. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Like, oh, go charge into that machine gun nest to distract it while sappers blow it up. Go charge through that minefield since we can't afford to lose any tanks to them. Rush down Chaos Space Marines with bundles of explosives and bayonets to hold them still for anti-armor weapons. Yes, sir, and off they go to die. But take like an artilleryman, for example. This would much better convey what the Cult of Sacrifice is like. They aren't really in danger most of the time, so they won't be dying very much, but that's fine, because death is the final destination of all the Death Korps, but not the reason they exist. By staying alive and maintaining fire, that artilleryman is serving the God Emperor. Where the Cult of Sacrifice comes in is he will not give a shit about anything else but his duty. Enemies could be vaulting the sides of his firing position. Counter-battery artillery will be actively falling on top of his head. Aircraft could be bombing him. Demons could be exploding out of the fabric of reality to eat his liver alive. And that artilleryman will continue his duty, never stopping or slowing his rate of fire during a vital bombardment, even if it means certain death. Because if his life ends while manning his gun and doing his duty, ensuring that it continues to fire until the very last second, then so be it. That is simply what his role in life is. Long story short, the Cult of Sacrifice is terribly named because it's more or less the cult of duty/service. Like, duty is everything, life is service, and death is a sacrifice and final atonement for the sins of Krieg. TLDR, the cult of do your job. It is not exclusively about martyrdom. So while there's plenty of jokes that Kriegers are more than willing to just run in and die, it's only like half true. The memes, that is, they're only like half true. The actual thing in lore, it's mostly about service and doing your job, and it's an important distinction to make. And that brings us to the second part of this video, the Death Korps being better than everybody else. The Imperium thought that Krieg was just completely wiped away. They had no expectation that anybody survived, which is why they didn't check back for like 500 years. And when they eventually did, it was mostly just a forlorn scouting expedition. Like, they expected to show up and then just go, yup, everybody's dead. Alright, moving on with our schedule. They didn't expect anybody to be alive, so when they showed up and they found a hell of a lot of people ready to die for the Emperor, they were very surprised. So the scout reported back to the Administratum, barely able to breathe with the amount of excitement because, oh my god, what they had discovered on Krieg was insane. The Administratum at first went, we've seen Death Worlds before, you're probably all barely alive, what can you afford to give? Maybe like one small regiment of guardsmen like every few years kind of thing? And Krieg basically looked at them for a few seconds and went, oh yeah, we can give you one. We've also got 20 more ready to go. They show up, expecting everybody to be dead, and out of this tomb world, an entire army of guardsmen just march out, and all of their commanders basically went, We don't care where you send us, we will answer any call, but we would really prefer if you send us to planets as close to hell as physically possible. The worse the environment, the better we'll enjoy it, so that would be great. Oh, and if the chance of like everybody dying is like 100%, that would be even better. You know, give us the God Emperor's hardest battles. Could you imagine the unbelievable hard-on that they would have?
That had to have taken at least like 30 seconds for them to process. I mean,
It took a hot minute. So there's that meme of like anything in the Imperium taking hundreds of years. Normally, it would take bare minimum like a few decades to 100 or so years for literally anything to get through the Administratum. Krieg managed to get it done in a few short years. They skipped the entire fucking line, went straight to the front.
do y'all need more? We can fabricate a few more.
Oh no, that was the
No
thing,
big
yeah.
deal.
Krieg was like, we have 20 regiments ready for full combat deployment right now. We've got dozens more in training, don't worry. We didn't expect you to be back so soon, but we'll step it up. We'll hit the turbo.
20,000 units already and millions more on the way.
And the initial few campaigns were nothing short of a meme. Deployed to a world to assist another regiment in an ongoing suppression war against traitors, the Death Korps fucking sweeps. It was supposed to take decades or cost millions of guard lives to pull a clean win. The Death Korps wraps things up in 2 years and only suffers severe losses, which are almost immediately replenished. And not only do the Kriegers not complain about it, they lament that more of their men weren't able to die for the Emperor and ask for a harder deployment next time. Normal guardsmen drop to their knees and cry in joy at surviving the Emperor's hardest battles. Kriegers drop to their knees and cry in sorrow at not dying in the hardest battles.
You're just built different.
Dude, they're so gung-ho to die. We haven't even gotten close to it yet. The next major deployment, also against traitors, and this is a wonderful example of the siege mentality and the overwhelming firepower that Krieg likes to employ. So, the world they were deployed to had a history of insurrections and minor rebellions, not uncommon in the grand scheme of the Imperium. You know, a lot of worlds generally suffer this. And the Kriegers had once again fucking swept the world without issue. The rebels were down to their last hive city, and Krieg settled in for a siege. Only instead of actually engaging in a siege with any intention of actually taking the hive city, the Death Korps was ordered to make an example of the city. And make an example did they. They bombarded it from every angle with countless artillery guns for 10 years.
What city?
Exactly. They weren't even fighting. They weren't pushing their men forward to try and take the city. They were just nuking it to pieces with endless artillery fire, setting an example out of them so that nobody would ever rebel on the world again. But the thing is, the funny part about this, the Death Korps didn't stop after the Hive City surrendered. The city surrendered after 5 years, being reduced to a wreck and rubble. The Death Korps just didn't care.
How are there still people alive?
Because hive cities are huge. They stretch kilometers into the air, kilometers into the dirt, and like dozens, hundreds of kilometers across the earth. They're fucking massive, okay? There's a lot of territory you need to level.
They've been bombarding it for 7 years.
Yeah, and 7 years is how long it took for them to kill everybody inside of it. They're all dead.
Then they went 3 years afterwards?
Yeah, they didn't stop. They didn't bend or break. They just went, lol. Fuck it, we're gonna keep bombarding it. Wanna watch me go for an even 10? And then they did. And then they immediately turned around after reducing the hive city to literal rubble, just a mountain of rubble. And then they looked at all of the other hive cities that had a history of being unruly, and they went, ha! Look at what we just did for the last 10 years, and we'll fucking do it again, just give us a reason. And then they left. And that world no longer has loyalty issues.
Extremely based.
Pretty much every problem world that the Death Korps was sent to stopped being a problem, and it didn't really matter what the planet was like. Since Krieg was such a hellhole, the Imperium could deploy Kriegsmen literally anywhere, and since they wanted to go to the worst planets imaginable, it meant that the Imperium could redirect other guard regiments to worlds that they were better suited for or that they could actually get shit done on. The value of Krieg just kept shooting higher and higher. And this ties a little bit into the initial mistrust and surprise. You see, Krieg has the ability to actually support all of this due to some probably heretical shit. Not like chaos corruption, Krieg is entirely pure and loyal, but just things that the Mechanicus Tech priests and Ecclesiarchy regular priests and Administratum paperwork priests just really don't like. For example, Guard generally aren't allowed to be raised in full combined arms units ever since the Horus Heresy, and they're not supposed to be like really enormously big manpower-wise in like raw numbers. Krieg is allowed to do this since the units they produce actually get results, don't care about casualties, and have literally unbreakable morale and loyalty. Wherever the Death Korps is deployed, they will win unless they are literally killed to the last man.
And then you got to kill the 8 million more that show up afterwards.
So when I was actually looking at engagements for this script and like looking for jot points to discuss, one thing I noticed is that as far as I could tell, there was only 2 examples of the Death Korps ever actually losing, which is number 1, the Imperium gave up because they had more important things to do, like, oh, okay, we're not going to continue to smash the Tau because we're being invaded by a Tyranid hive fleet and they're showing up in numbers of yes, or, oh god, the Orcs have launched the 3rd invasion of Armageddon, so they need to pull the Death Korps out to go deal with something more important.
Invasion of Armageddon?
Yeah, Armageddon is the name of another hell world, similar to Krieg, but...
Okay.
Natural instead of nuclear. And the Orcs really, really like Armageddon because, you know, it's real good fighting. They can show up there and have the greatest fight ever. The super Uj Wa. The Umis put up a great fight. You know, it's stupid orc shit. It's not important. It's just orcs being orcs.
Do they play I Don't Want to Miss a Thing every time they show up?
I imagine they probably would. The orcs have even got so familiar with the people on Armageddon that they've, like, not friends, but, like, professional colleagues. Armageddon, its own thing. Basically, there's a guy called Commissar Yarrick who repulsed the orcs last time, and when the orcs captured him, they basically sat him down, patted him on the shoulder, said, "You done great, that was a wonderful fight." And then they just sent him on his way and let him go. And they were like, prepare for next time, because it's going to be even better. The orcs are fucking ridiculous. Comedic relief faction.
They are fulfilling that role.
Absolutely. But back on track. Armageddon's entirely off topic for Krieg. But Krieg had become so important because of this that the High Lords of Terra, the rulers of the Imperium at the time, and the Administratum called a giant council of all the Imperial factions and cliques and all of that stuff, right? So they sat down with the Ecclesiarchy, the Mechanicus, and the Assassinorum, and all of these organizations, right? And then they took a Kriegsman and slammed him down on the table and went, okay, listen up, dipshits. This is brilliant. I love this. And if anything were to happen to it, I would kill everyone in this room and then myself. So if anybody thinks they can fuck with Krieg, no, you can't. In fact, it's law now. They do not get bothered much. Which is really, really funny because, like I mentioned, there's a very high probability that they have done and rely on some heretical methods to produce all of those soldiers. To start with, again, it's like tech heresy, it's not like chaos crap, but Krieg is heavily implied to not only have pioneered and enhanced technology, but develop straight up new stuff. Mainly in order to survive the radiation-blasted hellscapes of their homeworld, they've engaged in a generations-long eugenics and genetic modification program, weeding out those with mutations or vulnerabilities to radiation, while encouraging genetics that are resistant to it and make the average Krieger just a cut above the rest of everyone else. They're just built different, built better.
I see no issue with this.
They also very big might here, so lore nerds, don't at me in the comments. This is something that's never been fully explained or confirmed. There are much vaguer hints that Krieg also does some shenanigans with cloning away from prying eyes under the surface of their world. Krieg produces way fucking more, way faster than it should be able to. So there's something going on there. To what degree or to what level, no idea. But this may also just be an issue of Games Workshop not understanding numbers as they do a lot of the time, and giving Krieg a way higher output than is feasible.
Alright, we can ignore the IRL reasons, alright? Everything's gotta have an actual reason for it in universe.
Look, yeah, but the problem is that Games Workshop's lack of understanding for numbers gets so fucking bad that they have like an entire war across a planet against the orcs, and some writer goes, ah yes, the Death Korps took horrific casualties of 1,900 dead. And you're like, excuse me? What?
1,900. We left off the times 10 to the whatever power.
There's also my personal favorite, where it's like, how big is an Imperial Guard regiment? And the answer is anywhere from like 10,000 men at the low end to 750,000 at the high end.
What?
Yeah, it's a bit of a fucking scale, isn't it?
Just a little bit of one.
You know what the best part about that is? That's the same author. The same author came up with both of those numbers.
What?
Look, GW and the Black Library and all of their writers do a really, really good job at a lot of things for most of their books, but numbers is like the one thing that they cannot figure out. They can't. Personally, with what we know is canon and other stuff that we've seen them do, I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that the numbers Krieg has and what they output, there's probably some shenaniganery going on there below the surface. I want you to look at the Death Riders, okay? Does that look like a normal horse to you, Steve?
I think we already covered the horses in the last video. But no.
Genetic abominations. Also, they're adorable. Look, they're wearing gas masks just like the Krieg guardsmen are. Isn't that cute?
I don't know if I call that adorable, but okay.
they're equipped
When you
with
attach a laser onto the end of that, then it might be cool.
Oh, they have weapons attached to the horses sometimes. There are versions of them that do, but
Okay,
that's not
but
important.
Is it coming off the gas mask is the real question here.
No, normally they're coming off the side of the horse or the guy on the back, and it's not important. Like I was saying, they have like a carapace endoskeleton throughout their entire body. Basically, every inch is protected by thick bone plates, and they are profoundly violent. Unlike normal horses, which startle at loud noises and sometimes just die of a heart attack if you scare them, these things are incredibly aggressive and will charge through artillery fire just to kick you to death.
Based horses?
I don't remember if this is still canon or if I'm thinking about something different, but this is too funny not to bring up. They're also carnivorous.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that in the last video.
Yeah, I don't remember if I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they are carnivorous horses. And if Krieg can produce that intentionally, there is no fucking universe where they're not applying that at least a little bit, that juiced cocktail of genetics, to their soldiers as well. I refuse to believe that they're not. Especially with the stuff that Kriegsmen can endure. Like, it shouldn't be possible for a baseline human. With that out of the way, let's talk about how they're trained. And I got 2 words for you, Steve. Child soldiers.
Outstanding.
I'll be honest, this is pretty par for the course on a lot of worlds in the Imperium. Cadian troopers, Vostroyan firstborn, Catachan, dear god. You know, training and introduction into the Guard happens pretty much from birth, and you'll train your whole life leading up to being old enough to join properly. However, in most cases, you are sending your child recruits to, like, practice stripping weapons and drilling at the target range and how to march and, like, how to apply a tourniquet and stuff like that, you know, when the actual training happens when they become of age. You're not doing what Krieg does and forcing them to dig trenches in the irradiated desert of a hell world, then actively shelling them for days on end with live munitions, all at the tender age of 15, only to drag them out and then force them to listen afterwards to critiques and examples of failed trench digging. Said examples being the cadets that got vaporized by an artillery shell landing directly on them, or something.
How else are they supposed to get trained? I mean, you gotta make sure they're effective somehow.
The Death Korps of Krieg believes in on-the-job learning.
A great way to train people.
They don't just train their soldiers, by the way, they break them utterly. Like, you aren't crawling through barbed wire while live rounds whiz overhead like you've seen in all of those classic military movies. You're crawling through barbed wire and mud while live mortar rounds land nearby, and instructors on perches will actively shoot you if they see you. And it happens painfully early. Like, recruits will be acclimated to wearing a gas mask and full trench coat combat gear at 13. They'll experience their first artillery bombardment at 14. They'll be shelled for weeks at 15 to see if they break under the strain, and engage in mock battles with other trainee groups using live rounds at 16. The training is grueling and doesn't last for a few months, then like a break or something. It is years on end every single day. Drills, inspections, all at the same time. And each different branch of the military goes through like the same thing, but for their own area. Like, medic trainees will actually have to go inspect and deal with the wounded and dead from that morning's drills, and artillery crew will actively be loading and firing guns for years until they can maintain stupid rates of fire for like an entire 12-hour shift on the guns.
When the shit gets real, you're always going to default to your to whatever your lowest level of training, and I mean you got to drill it into them somehow. You got to make all these conditions realistic.
So that's fair. And the Death Korps does perform at a ludicrously higher level than most other guard units in like sieges and attritional warfare. But it's a little bit ridiculous that the attrition for Krieg guards regiments starts before they're even in the guard. It starts when they're like not even fully trained yet. Like,
well, I mean, if you're sending the weaklings out there, you know, that attrition rate's going to be even worse. I mean, it's realistically going to be the same. No, it would actually probably get worse anyway than just combining the rates for both of them together. Because, you know, you can't rely on the guy next to you, so...
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And it's made all the worse that, like, they don't do this in the underground bunkers or whatever and practice firing drills there. No, it's all on the surface of Krieg. That irradiated hellscape. Fun note as well, there are some Sisyphusian things that go on, like pushing the boulder up a hill just to roll down and do it again. Engineering corps will practice laying millions of mines, which infantry units the next day will then practice clearing and moving through for the cycle to repeat. The trench monkeys will dig countless hundreds of kilometers of trenches, only for armored assault units to practice filling them in and breaching them the next morning. The entire surface of Krieg is this hellscape nightmare around any of their communities and their cities and stuff, where they're just never-ending training. And these aren't adults doing this. This is kids. These are like 15, 16-year-olds that are actually doing this. And that's another thing. Because they never take their gas masks and their clothes and their stuff off, nobody knows how old the graduates actually are. Nobody even knows if there's an official age for when people start and finish this. It may literally just be, well, they've developed a little faster, so they're gonna start, and you may end up with like a 16-year-old in the trenches besides you when you're fighting chaos demons and shit. They may be of age, they might be like 18, 19, 20 when they're out there on the front lines, but there's a lot of suspicion from commissars and other units that when they're fighting besides Kriegers, they're not fighting beside adults, which again raises questions. If that's the case, and they are underage, how the fuck do Kriegers fight at such a high level for so long?
It's all that training, man.
No, there's gotta be some fuckery going on Krieg. And all of this leads to a culture and operation of Krieg as a military force that is just hilarious. We're gonna start with medics. What do you think the role of medics in Krieg actually are?
To kill all the people that aren't of use anymore.
Yes, absolutely. So, on the one hand, they are responsible for healing people, but only people that they have deemed useful enough to heal. For example, let's say someone's had their chest blown open, but they're still alive and there's a chance they could be saved. Well, the resources...
Not of use.
No,
Get them out of here.
It's not just not of use. Like they'll heal that person if they can return to service. But that's not what it's about. It's like the grim analytics of war, okay? The resources it would take to heal that one person and get them back fighting fit on the front line is not worth it when you could instead use those resources to get 10 other minor or moderately injured people back into the trenches. And then, when all is said and done, if they really need it, because, you know, recycle, eco-friendly for the God Emperor, they'll either take the body and chuck it into the processing machine and then produce corpse starch with it to feed other troops, or they will then put them on the sandbag division. And then you've got stuff like the Death Riders that we've talked about. They are borderline suicidal. They are riding horses, extremely durable horses, granted, but many of the weapons that they have are not like anti-infantry weapons, because you don't need a Death Rider to kill an infantryman. They're anti-tank weapons. They've got a really long spear with a giant anti-tank explosive on the end of it that they're going to YOLO at an enemy tank with and try to blow up. And it doesn't work out great. Very buffed horses they may be, and armored guardsmen may be riding them, but you're charging a tank It didn't go well for the Polish in real life when they tried the same thing against the Germans during World War II. It doesn't go very well for Kriegers in general during their sieges most often. But again, it works, so they do it, and the attrition is just not a problem. Every single man and woman in the Death Korps fully believes that the only reason they're even alive is to die for the God Emperor. And it gets to the point where commissars, as we've discussed, have to do the exact opposite with Krieg as they normally do. Normally, commissars, you remember what we discussed about commissars, right?
Yes, that actual commissars.
Yeah, they've got to rile the troops up, force them to run into machine gun fire, do your duty or I'll shoot you in the back of the head kind of thing. But with Krieg, the commissars are actually just babysitters. Their entire job is to curb the self-sacrificial tendencies of the Kriegsmen. They're like, no, listen to me. We can do this with minimal casualties. And then every single Krieger is basically like, no, and then blow a whistle and over the top of the trenches they go, running in to die. And at that point, the commissars are like, God, fuck, shit, not again, god damn it. And they have to run after the Kriegers to try to get them to advance in a way that's not suicidal. They're like, okay, look, we're gonna advance this way, alright? All of you, follow me. I'm the goddamn commissar. I am the one that's going to lead here. You will follow my orders. Now, for the most part, the Imperium is fine with allowing heavy attrition, but even for the commissars who are not supposed to be dying, they're not supposed to be on the front lines kind of thing, where they're getting mowed down by the enemy. Even commissars die in ridiculous numbers, because the only way to control Kriegers and to get them to listen is to be as insane as they are and be leading from the front. If you're calling in orders from miles behind the line, they're just going to ignore you and go die in a minefield somewhere.
At least you have a chance if you're at the front. I mean, they'll still probably do it regardless.
The Kriegers are nice enough that when they have a commanding officer, they give them an honor guard. And the honor guard's entire job is to literally just Mr. President them all the time. There's an incoming, missile or something. Mr. President, get down! And they, push him out of the way and face tank the missile for him. So the Kriegers are mind-numbingly willing to throw themselves to their deaths. And as I'm sure you can imagine, this has led to some of the most grinding attritional strategy that has ever been seen. 40k is a very attritional universe in general. Casualties in unbelievable numbers are just a given for all factions, even the Space Marines with their elite power armor and stuff. But
I know we already covered this a little bit. How the fuck do they supply all this?
Don't ask questions. Don't look too deep into it. I mean, so
I just mean the tanks and stuff, not the human toll.
If I remember correctly, I think Krieg has a large portion of other worlds dedicated to arming them. Krieg does the bulk of the work. They'll be okay, we can make artillery pieces, we can make the gear for our infantry and stuff like that, we can make our las guns, whatever. If I remember correctly, I think Krieg has a large portion of other worlds dedicated to arming them. So you've got an entire Forge world dedicated to just vomiting out endless artillery and ammunition shells and stuff for the Death Korps. Unlike the majority of other Guard regiments, which use a few patterns of very basic Lehman Russ battle tanks or las guns and stuff, the Death Korps uses souped up, more powerful las guns that are much rarer. They use a few different specialized versions of the Lehman Russ, which I think one of them has got a plasma gun, one of them has got a specialized anti-armor gun that's much more rare to find in other Imperial Guard units. And so while Krieg can supply a lot of the resources that their own units need, and they can basically endlessly resupply manpower, when it comes to the heavy war gear and stuff, it's them plus the assistance of a few other big manufacturing worlds that feed into the Death Korps. The last thing I wanted to talk about is their raw numbers. This is I'm pulling a Senator Armstrong. I'm making it the fuck up. Krieg does not have 500,000 guardsmen across all of its regiments. That's bullshit. I refuse to listen to any numbers that are less than 1 million. Some basic napkin math that I did that's probably wrong is that the Death Korps of Krieg has anywhere from 40 to 50 regiments, which is already quite a bit. Those are listed on the wiki and stuff. Those are official that we know about and that exist / haven't been wiped out. And that's a lot of troops, okay? That's a shitload. By the highest number of those regiments, like, you just pick the one that's got the biggest number. So this is like the 127th, this is like the 215th, stuff like that, you know? If we just pick the highest number, then Krieg has about 997 regiments just out and about.
What?
Yeah, it's a fucking lot. I didn't know it was that many. If we go by that and we assume that they maintain other regiments and don't just increase the number, because the logic I have when looking at this is like, okay, the Death Korps don't seem like the people that if a regiment gets wiped out, they like posthumously save the number, you know what I mean? Like, this is the 83rd and they got wiped out and there will never be another 83rd, like they're memorialized forever. They don't seem like those kind of people. They seem like they would just immediately recycle the number into a new regiment. So in order for Krieg to have 997 regiments, they would probably need to actually have that many at any given time. And here's the thing with numbers as well, okay? Generally, I would put the number of guardsmen for like a normal regiment at say like 50,000 men. That's a lot.
Just a few.
That's a lot. Although I'll be honest with you, I think the number should be higher. I would put the number at 100,000. Which means if we go to the funny number of almost 1,000 regiments, Krieg, potentially with 100,000 men per regiment, is running around with 1 billion people. 1 billion guardsmen are running around in the Death Korps of Krieg, wherever the Imperium might need them. At the smaller scale, it would be more like maybe 20, 30, 40 million people. But that's using, like, the low estimate. I prefer the high estimate, because it's silly.
The low estimate's no fun.
No, the low estimate isn't any fun. Especially because the Death Korps generally doesn't fight, like, minor battles. It's like, oh, they showed up to stop an entire orc war, which is literally numberless. Like, they just don't stop coming. The entirety of the planet is just blacked out with orcs, or greened out, I guess, and they're still fucking coming. Honestly, this is a viewer engagement moment because we're basically done. How many guardsmen do you think are in a Krieg regiment? Like, how big do you think the Krieg Guardsman Corps, like, how big do you think the Death Korps of Krieg is? I'm perfectly okay. My guess is around 1,000 regiments, and then each one has like 100,000 guys in it, plus all their equipment and stuff, so tell me what you think. I think it would be interesting to see where people kind of fall on that. Anything you'd like to say before we end off, Steve?
Nope.
And that's it. If you've made it this far, you're clearly the target audience, so why not leave a like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell, all that good stuff to help the channel out, and check out some of our other content. If you're feeling generous, we have a Patreon where you can throw money at us if you like making bad decisions, and to the people who have already made bad decisions, a huge thanks to the arms dealers, supplying us with all the things discussed in today's video for hands-on testing. I just wish that you didn't send me so many corpses. What am I supposed to do with 10 shipping containers of dead guardsmen? To the food merchants ensuring my co-host is fed and docile enough for recordings, a huge thanks to you as well. And to the coffee vendors fueling my war on sleep, it may not be doing anything. My doctor says I have sleep apnea and that's the problem. And thanks to the new guys. Jamie, Kearney, Cerny, however you pronounce that, I assume he's Scottish, so the bagpipes are coming back to troll me again. And Ted. Just Ted. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the support. And with that, video over, me hungry, pizza in oven, goodbye.